Below is a rebuilt higher retention version designed for a 17-minute voiceover, about 2,400 to 2,700 words, based on common narration speeds around 140, 150 WPM. No headings, tight pacing, more open loops, micro payoffs, and pattern interrupts baked into the writing. Listen carefully, because if you're treating this leak as one more political scandal, you're already inside the trap. If the reports are even partly true, if what's circulating reflects a real war-shaped proposal with Iran, then what you're looking at is not chaos. It's a machine that shows up when a superpower hits a constraint wall. Debt, credibility, exhaustion, and the rising cost of maintaining control. Here's the part most people miss. Systems don't collapse because leaders suddenly become irrational. Systems collapse because the incentives become so tight that even rational decisions produce dangerous outcomes. And I'm going to make a claim that will sound extreme until you see the structure. The leak isn't the story. The story is why the leak makes sense. Because when the world is carrying record-scale leverage, governments stop choosing between peace and war, like it's a moral debate. They start choosing between types of pressure release. And that means conflict becomes a policy instrument. Now, quick authority check, because this isn't vibes. Global debt has been reported near record extremes around the mid-$300 trillion range by late 2025. That is not a normal environment. That is a fragility environment. Debt at that scale is a pressure system. It compresses decision-making. It reduces tolerance for surprises. It makes every shock, oil, shipping, inflation, rates, more explosive because refinancing becomes the hidden dependency underneath everything. Now anchor that to what's happening in public reporting. Talk of maximum pressure, oil flows, retaliation math, and the real-world possibility of sustained strikes or sustained escalation pathways. That combination does not produce calm diplomacy. It produces a pattern. And the pattern is always the same. When internal weakness becomes unmanageable, the system converts it into external theater. Not always full war, often something more dangerous. A war-shaped proposal, limited, deniable, controlled, designed to extract concessions, change market pricing, intimidate rivals, and consolidate domestic power, without paying the full cost of real war. And if you think controlled conflict sounds safer, stay with me, because that phrase has ended more empires than open war ever did. In a minute, I'm going to show you the mechanism, 4 stages. Then I'm going to prove it with history. Then we're going to apply it to the present like a checklist. And at the end, I'll give you the practical takeaway. What to watch next, what signals confirm the next stage, and how not to get emotionally hijacked when the machine starts turning faster. But first, one warning. This is not about loving or hating Trump. This is not about right versus left. This is about incentives, math, pressure, and the ancient truth that when reality becomes unaffordable, narratives become weapons. Okay, here's the mechanism. Stage 1, the setup. A dominant power builds a system that works so well it becomes addictive. Reserve currency gravity, deep capital markets, global alliances, security umbrella credibility, and the assumption that leadership is permanent. At this stage, credibility is high. Mistakes are survivable. The system can absorb shocks. Stage 2, expansion, overextension, debasement, promise inflation. The system starts funding everything: military reach, domestic commitments, bailouts, political bargains, debt climbs, institutions stretch. Leaders discover they can solve problems with liquidity, sanctions, messaging, or controlled pressure. The cost doesn't show up immediately. That's the key, so the behavior gets reinforced. Stage 3, crisis, loss of control. The contradiction becomes visible. The public is exhausted, markets become jumpy, rivals test the perimeter, allies hesitate, and the system still needs to project strength. But real strength becomes expensive. This is where the leadership class becomes desperate for shortcuts. Stage 4, the outcome, manufactured urgency. The system generates confrontation, sometimes real, sometimes partially staged, sometimes limited, that drags attention away from internal weakness and toward an external enemy. The goal is not always victory. The goal is repricing reality, justify extraordinary policy, unify factions, intimidate opponents, move capital, reset narratives, and buy time. That's the machine. Setup, expansion, crisis, manufactured urgency. Now I'm going to prove it with history, not to entertain you, to demonstrate the structure. And while you listen, notice something. The details change, the flags change, the speeches change, but the incentives don't. First proof, the Spanish-American War and the logic of catalytic narrative. Setup. By the late 1800s, the United States had rapidly industrialized. Rising financial power, rising national confidence, a political class increasingly comfortable with projecting influence outward. And here's the crucial part. The information environment was evolving. Newspapers weren't just reporting. Some were shaping mass emotion at scale, an early version of narrative industrial power. Expansion. The U.S. began competing for global status. Overseas markets mattered. Naval power mattered. Domestic politics mattered. Expansionist ideas became mainstream, sometimes openly, sometimes wrapped in moral language. The system was primed for a trigger, something that would unify public attention and justify external action. Crisis. Cuba's rebellion against Spain created volatility. American interests were exposed. Political competition intensified. The press sensationalized events. Public emotion rose. Leaders faced a problem. How do you move from strategic interest to military action without looking like you're simply grabbing territory? Then the outcome. 1898. The USS Maine explodes in Havana Harbor. The cause was contested and debated for years, but the effect was immediate and measurable. A catalytic event became moral ignition. Remember, the Maine wasn't just a slogan. It was a lever. It accelerated the U.S. into war, reframed action as righteous, and ended with the U.S. gaining control over former Spanish territories, expanding reach dramatically. Now listen, whether you believe the narrative or not is not the point. The point is structural. Under expansion pressure, a catalytic event becomes the mechanism to reprice consent. Setup, expansion, crisis, manufactured urgency, same machine. Second proof, 1971, Nixon shock, and how financial war replaces political impossibility. Setup. After World War II, Bretton Woods made the dollar central. The U.S. had unmatched industrial capacity and credibility. The dollar was as good as gold under a fixed convertibility promise. Trust, structure, reserve privilege, expansion. Then spending grows beyond what the system can sustainably back. Vietnam, domestic programs, strategic commitments. Dollars flowed overseas. Foreign governments accumulated claims on U.S. gold. The promise looked stable, but the math deteriorated. Expansion outpaced backing. The system ran on confidence, crisis. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, pressure intensified. Gold outflows, sustainability questions, allies testing the promise. The U.S. faced a constraint wall, tighten dramatically, risk recession, political collapse, or break the promise and reset the system. Outcome. 1971, Nixon suspends gold convertibility. Temporary becomes permanent. Currencies float. Inflation surges through the 1970s. The global order resets around a new reality: fiat, credibility, and geopolitical architecture. Notice what happened. When political reality made the old promise impossible, leadership chose a controlled rupture, engineered break, rather than accept the full cost of constraint. That is the same machine, expressed financially. Setup, expansion, crisis, manufactured urgency, then reset. Third proof. 2003, Iraq, and the logic of threat packaging in a credibility cycle. Setup. After the Cold War, the U.S. was unipolar, military tech, alliances, intelligence reach. After 9/11, the system gained the most powerful fuel a government can have: open-ended security legitimacy. The public wanted protection. Leaders had permission. Expansion. The war on terror broadened. Security bureaucracy expanded. Surveillance expanded. Overseas operations expanded. Threats justified power, and power searched for threats. Meanwhile, long-term costs, financial and reputational, were pushed forward. Crisis. The system needed decisive action to solve uncertainty, signal dominance, and deter adversaries. Domestic pressure demanded clarity. Rivals watched. Allies hesitated. Outcome? Iraq was packaged as urgent: weapons of mass destruction, imminent threat, compressed debate. Extraordinary measures felt necessary. The war happened. The aftermath became prolonged, costly, destabilizing, classic overextension fallout. Again, I'm not asking you for partisan emotion. I'm asking you to see structure. When the system needs urgency, it manufactures urgency. When it needs unity, it manufactures a threat. When it needs to escape constraints, it uses shock. Now we apply the mechanism to the present, step by step, like a cold checklist. Stage 1, setup. The United States sits at the center of the modern financial system. Dollar settlement, deep treasury markets, alliances, sanctions power, institutional influence. That foundation is real. It's why global capital still treats you. S policy like gravity. Check. Stage 2, expansion, overextension, and debasement. Here is where the numbers stop being abstract. In a world where global debt is reported at record extremes, you are not looking at stability. You are looking at dependence, governments, companies, households, running on refinancing, confidence, and policy backstops. And when the dominant power is part of that debt ecosystem, its policy choices become more fragile, more sensitive to shocks, more addicted to narrative management. Now add the geopolitical layer: sanctions, architecture, maximum pressure temptations, weaponized finance, oil choke point leverage. In public reporting and public debate, oil cash flow is treated like strategic oxygen, and the pressure logic shows up again and again. Restrict, squeeze, isolate, signal. That is stage 2 behavior. Expand control mechanisms because direct solutions are expensive. Check. Stage 3, crisis, loss of control. This is the stage we are in right now, not because America collapses tomorrow. Because the system is showing constraint signals, polarization, credibility fights, rivals testing boundaries, allies recalculating, and an international environment where small escalations reprice energy and credit fast. And here's the most important point. In a debt-saturated system, markets punish uncertainty more quickly, because uncertainty raises risk premium. Risk premium tightens financial conditions. Tighter financial conditions make everything politically harder. That is the loop. So when you see rising rhetoric, rising posture signals, and a constant background of what if strikes happen? What if retaliation happens? What if shipping routes get disrupted? You are not watching random drama. You are watching the system advertise that it is losing tolerance for instability while simultaneously creating more of it. Verified. Now stage 4, manufactured urgency, the inevitable outcome. This is where the leak matters. And we have to be precise. I'm not claiming we've seen the document. I'm not telling you a fairy tale. What I'm saying is structural. When you see a cluster of signals, escalating rhetoric, policy pressure, contingency prep talk, oil choke narratives, the probability of war-shaped proposals rises sharply. Undeniable. Now let's define war-shaped so you can spot it instantly. War-shaped proposals are actions that resemble war in optics and leverage, but are engineered to be politically survivable. Limited strikes framed as deterrence. Covert operations with plausible deniability. Short-duration shock messaging without occupation. A narrow window designed to force talks. Timing that conveniently reshuffles headlines, markets, and domestic attention. This is not conspiracy. This is incentive. Because total war is expensive. Total war is unpredictable. Total war breaks markets and risks regime-level backlash. So systems under constraint try to harvest the benefits of war. Unity, fear, deterrence posture, capital rotation, without paying the full cost. And here's the trap. Controlled conflict is the easiest thing to miscalculate. It's the easiest thing to trigger unintended escalation. It's the easiest way to start a chain you can't stop. So let's run the incentives. No ideology, just mechanics. If the U.S. wants to constrain Iran's revenue and reduce its leverage, pressure oil flows in financial channels. That automatically collides with global energy demand, shipping routes, tanker insurance, and regional proxy dynamics. You don't need a full war for markets to react. You need uncertainty. One incident, one misread signal, one drone swarm, one naval collision, and suddenly oil reprices, shipping reprices, and credit conditions tighten. Check. Now add credibility. If leaders escalate language, they create a credibility commodity. Once credibility becomes the commodity, leaders become prisoners of posture. Because backing down costs more than stepping forward. That's why rhetoric is never just rhetoric at this stage. It's an option contract written on future action. Verified. Now add the limited strike pitch. Limited strikes are always sold as clean, fast, decisive, but the machine does not control second-order consequences. Iran has asymmetric tools, proxies, cyber, maritime disruption, regional escalation pathways. Containment is not a guarantee. Containment is a hope, undeniable. Now here's the deeper revelation, the one that turns this from geopolitics into finance. In a debt-saturated world, geopolitical shocks do not stay geopolitical. They become financial policy events. Oil spikes feed inflation expectations. Inflation expectations feed rate expectations. Rates feed refinancing stress. Refinancing stress feeds growth slowdown. Growth slowdown feeds political instability. Political instability feeds market volatility. Market volatility feeds emergency policy response. One fake war-shaped proposal can become a real catalyst because markets don't wait for truth. Markets move on probability, and probability is enough to raise the price of money. That's the machine. And once a system learns it can solve problems by injecting urgency, it becomes addicted because urgency is a multi-tool. It justifies surveillance. It reframes budgets. It explains economic pain. It unifies factions. It redirects anger. But the cost is long-term. Every urgency injection reduces the public's sensitivity threshold. Meaning next time, the system needs a bigger shock to get the same effect. That's how cycles accelerate. Now, pattern interrupt, look at this from the viewer's perspective. Most people think the danger is a war starts. Wrong. The most dangerous moment is when leaders believe they can imitate war, just enough to get the benefits without triggering the consequences. History's most famous last words are always the same. It'll be limited. It'll be contained. It'll be quick. Now let's kill the comforting myths. This time is different. American exceptionalism. Technology will save us. Markets always recover. No, exceptionalism is not a shield against incentives. Innovation is not a shield against debt math. Markets are not moral. Markets are a pricing engine. They reprice risk. That's all they do. And debt math is what makes this prophetic, not mystical, mathematical. High leverage reduces shock tolerance. Reduced shock tolerance increases crisis behavior. Crisis behavior increases the use of narrative weapons. Narrative weapons increase volatility. Volatility increases policy error risk. Policy error risk increases the need for more narrative control. That's your loop. So what do you do with this? Practically, first, stop consuming headlines like isolated events. Start reading them like machine outputs. Ask one question every time. What constraint is the system trying to escape right now? Debt, credibility, election pressure, market fragility, alliance management, oil pricing? Once you identify the constraint, the next move becomes predictable. Second, understand that limited conflict rhetoric is not calming. It's a sign the system is searching for the cheapest reset. Cheap resets are unstable. They rely on perfect control. Perfect control does not exist. Third, prepare for volatility regimes, not single events. A volatility regime means bigger swings, faster repricing, more narrative shocks, and policy responses that come suddenly. This doesn't mean panic. It means discipline, liquidity, risk management, and refusing to be emotionally hijacked by each leak or breaking alert. Fourth, watch indicators, not pundits. Energy risk premium, shipping insurance, credit spreads, emergency language from officials, sudden safe haven flows. When those move together, you are not watching political theater. You are watching the machine turn. And finally, this is the big one. Do not confuse fake war with fake consequences. The consequences are real because belief moves markets. A rumor changes probability. Probability changes pricing. Pricing changes policy. Policy changes reality. That's how systems work. Here's the final warning, stated cleanly. If the leak is real, it's not proof of one villain. It's proof the system has entered the phase where crisis tools become normal tools. And when crisis tools become normal tools, the next stage is not stability. The next stage is escalation risk, intentional or accidental. This pattern doesn't care who you voted for. It doesn't care what you believe. It doesn't care how confident you feel. Setup, expansion, crisis, manufactured urgency, that's the machine. So here's what I want you to do now. Subscribe, not because you need more news, but because you need the map. In the next video, I'm going to show you how the machine was built, how debt, currency power, sanctions, and security theater fused into one operating system, and what the next stage looks like if the system keeps choosing shock as a solution. Because the most dangerous moment isn't when a war starts. The most dangerous moment is when leaders think they can borrow fear, just enough to get the benefits, without paying the interest. And history's message to that idea is brutal. You don't get to borrow fear for free. If you want, paste your exact leak wording, Josh article snippet, or the key claims, and I'll lock this script even tighter by weaving in 2 or 3 specific open loops tied to those details, without making any claims that could get you flagged for misinformation or defamation.